Let's see if I can move this over a little bit. There we go. Yeah, we're live. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain there. Tonight we're going to talk about the tune port video that I put up today. And there seems to be confusion. If the comments are any indication, there seems to be confusion on the questions that I was asking about my giant failure experience. And what happened was, or at least what happened with this video, is that originally I had run a test where, and I forgot to, now that I remember, it reminds me, I forgot to put the link up for the other video, for the tune port video. But I did a tune port video, and I ran all of the different tune ports, even ran the carbureted stuff. I ran a single plane intake manifold converted, for fuel injection. I ran all kinds of stuff, but I ran it on a 383. And with two of the setups, both the extrude honed lower portion and then the TPIS one, with the big tube runners and the port matched upper plenum and then the bigger throttle body, with that 383, we were able to make 535 foot-pounds of torque, I think. And so that worked really well. So I got excited. I'm thinking, well, maybe if we could do that much with the 383, can I get to 500 with a 350? And obviously people didn't, and I thought that I pointed that out in the video, but people obviously didn't understand that or watch the video or listen, because the comments in the video or the comments about the video are like, yeah, you should just go up in displacement. You should put it on a 400. I'm like, yeah, we already did that on a 383, and a 400 would be even more, and all that would work. But my question was, can we do it with a 350? Can I make 500 foot-pounds of torque? Now, making 500 foot-pounds of torque with a 350 is not a terribly difficult thing to do, especially with a 355. We get that much closer. That's not a difficult thing to do, because contrary to what a lot of people think, if you put a small, mild camshaft in it, you're not going to make as much peak torque as if you put a good-sized cam in it. But if you put a good-sized cam in it, you also have to have the other things. You also have to have the intake manifold that's going to want to run where that camshaft wants to run, and also cylinder heads that are going to flow the amount of air that are required to make that run. And then you could have compression, you could have all those things. And so you can make a big peak power number and also a big peak torque number. The difficulty in this little exercise with the tune port 350 was not only we were trying to make a fairly big torque number, 1.39 to 1.4 foot-pounds per cubic inch, which is a pretty good number, but we are also trying to make it, given where a tune port wants to make power, given where the runner length is optimized, at a fairly low engine speed. And obviously with a tune port, we're limited a little bit in flow. It might be that if we put even bigger tubes on it, that would help. We'll get more flow from, because we certainly had enough flow from the airflow research heads. So those, we know that those will support the power. That's not the question. The question is, how do we get that big torque number? How do we get cylinder pressure down there in the 4,000 RPM or lower range? How do we get that? Obviously, the intake manifold is a step in the right direction, because it wants to enhance torque production down low. So it's limiting us in peak power, which we don't care about, but it actually is limiting us in peak torque as well, because we could make much more torque if we could put a combination in that would rev where the motor would rev more. But you'll see in the video that I tried a couple of different camshafts. We tried like a 218 cam and then a 230 cam. I thought, okay, that's a big enough change between the cams that we should see something that's happening. So we should see a trend. Okay, well, one of them maybe is a little too small and the other one maybe is a little too big. The bigger cam made more peak torque. And again, if we put a dual plane on there, it could have gone up even more. So the question is, without changing displacement, obviously everybody's throwing out boost too. Yeah, if we put a little bit of boost in it, we could get a big torque number. And I have, for the guys that are interested in that, I have turbo tune port videos, or a turbo tune port video up. So we ran boost on a tune port motor, and with very good results, because boost is just a multiplier of what's there. So if you have a motor that doesn't make a lot of horsepower but makes lots of torque, and you add boost to that, all you're going to do is go whoop, all of that stuff is elevated now. So now you're making even way more torque, and a bit more horsepower. So it does exactly what you would expect it to. It does what a Callaway Corvette did, which is why it was rated at way less horsepower than it was, 385 or something like that, and then 530 or 40 foot-pounds of torque, or maybe 580. I don't know. Somebody let me know in the comments. But just like with a factory tune port motor, it was rated at like 245 and 345. So it made way more torque than it made horsepower. Well, when you add boost to that kind of thing, all of that's going to continue. That's assuming that we have the same amount of boost. So without adding boost, without adding nitrous, and without changing the displacement, what are some of the things that we can do to change the torque output? Well, we talked about a lot of them. I mentioned a few of them in the video, and I wanted other people to mention them in the comments. One of them, obviously, is you got to run that tight LSA. You got to run 105, 106 degree LSA. I think that would help. And I mentioned that in the video that I thought that would be better. These are the two cams that we happen to have laying around to try with what we were doing. And they were by no means my choice of cam. I didn't design cams for them. I didn't have custom cams made. I didn't do any of that. I took these heads that we had. I took these couple of camshafts that Westech happened to have laying around, and we tried to put this combination together. And because I did the same thing with the 383. The 383 was a motor that was already together, and they allowed me to use it and run the tune port test. I didn't want to run it on 350 because I didn't want the motor not taking advantage of everything that those things had to offer. Quite honestly, it was the wrong camshaft for a tune port. It was way too big. And yet, because of what a tune port does, it still made really big torque. So I thought, well, if we could do this the right way and do it on a 350 and put a small tune portish cam, instead of the wrong cam, the right cam, a tune portish camshaft in there, maybe we could do it. So our poll today is going to be something interesting. Okay, so the poll for tonight is, you guys let me know, would a single pattern cam be a better choice for me to try to get a big torque number out of that tune port 350? Would that be a better way to go than the typical dual pattern cams that we run? Because we see that a lot when we run. I've run lots of single pattern versus dual pattern camshaft tests, and the reason that I don't normally go with a single pattern camshaft is because they can make more low speed power if you keep the intake duration the same. They tend to make more low speed power, but less. They don't carry the power up top. With the tune port, that's kind of what the intake does anyway. So let me know what you guys think. Would a single pattern cam might be a better way to go? We know that a tighter LSA, I think, would enhance things. Other things that we know probably would work, compression, because compression adds power like boost does. It adds it as a, normally we get between 3 and 4% for one full point of compression change. So if we can go from 9-to-1 to 10-to-1, we get 3 to 4% of power. In this case, we're looking at, between 300 and 400 horsepower. Let's say it's 400. So 400 times 4, 16 horsepower. So maybe we get somewhere between 10 and 15, or maybe probably not, maybe 20, but 10 and 15 foot-pounds of torque, let's say, from adding a point of compression. That's a step in the right direction, but we can't go up infinitely in compression. We can't go, well, let's just make it, if it was a 9-to-1, let's make it 12-to-1, and that way we get our number, because I don't think that that's realistic for a tune port being a driver, because this thing would be nice also if it was a driver. We had more than enough head flow, so I don't think more head flow would be the way to go. One of the people in the comments mentioned, well, you need to put a smaller port volume on it, and that will enhance low speed power. I don't think that that's going to happen at wide open throttle. I haven't seen that actually come into play, except on some very rare occasions. I've seen the optimum port volume and the combination of port volume and flow for a combination work better down low than a head that's theoretically too big, let's say. So a good example is that when we ran the Dart 225s on a 306-inch small block Ford with a 274 cam in it, That's 600 horsepower plus worth of cylinder head. And it suffered a little bit down low compared to a 195. But I'd have to go back and look, but I don't know that it suffered in too much in the peak torque area. I think that where it suffered was down lower than that. And so we're going to get that a lot. We saw that in the camshaft comparison too. When I ran the 218 cam and the 230 cam, we saw that they traded power. It lost power down low, gained power up top, but the peak torque number, which is the thing that we were interested in, changed by only 3 or 4 foot-pounds. So it's not very much there, but you know, it kind of rocked the curve, which is what we see. Compression won't do that. Compression will raise everything, kind of like boost does, just not nearly as much. The other options are obviously the tight LSA. We could go up and lift as well. Lift might show something. We might go from a, you know, let's say, and we could do all this with camshaft. We could also do it with rocker ratio. We could go from a 1.5 to a 1.6 on a small block Chevy, maybe go up to 1.7 and see, you know, see how much, see if the thing likes maybe more intake lift or more exhaust lift. We could play with that a little bit. I don't think at this power level that the flow rates maybe of the tune port setup itself, like a bigger throttle body or a bigger plenum, we might be able to play with plenum volume, maybe stack 2 of those together and increase that, see if that does anything. I haven't had big changes in power from plenum volume, but you know, it's always fun to try to test some of this stuff. We did test a tri-Y, and I'm sure people want to know about that. We did test a tri-Y versus a 4-into-1. And this is the takeaway for me for this kind of stuff. People want these takeaways. They want all these tests to be just like definitive black and white kind of things. Well, this is always better than this. You know, the opposite of what happened here today is why a lot of guys tell you that tri-Ys are always better than 4-into-1s. Well, NASCAR uses them, or whoever, whatever their favorite series is. And that's fantastic. And you should design the header so that it optimizes your power production for your particular application. So if you're running a drag race motor and you have a 6,000 stall converter and you run the thing to 9,800, well, then all you care about is power from the stall speed or higher on up. You know, guys do that. So you honestly don't care about 2,500, you know, 2,500 RPM, what the torque production is there. So for that particular application, your header design might be different than it is for a cup motor or Australian touring or pro stock or whatever it is you're doing. So the thing that I can tell you is every tri-Y header is not better than every 4-into-1 header, and every 4-into-1 header is not better than every tri-Y header. So what we are testing is just 2 different headers. So we might as well test 2 different 4-into-1 headers or 2 different tri-Y headers, and we might get a similar result, or different results. One of them might make more, one of them might make less. But my point is, we're not in this comparison. This tri-Y doesn't represent all tri-Ys, and this 4-into-1 doesn't represent all 4-into-1s. I've run lots and lots of testing and gotten a variety of different kinds of results. And they're usually very specific to the thing that we tested it on, to the things that we tested, and then the things that we tested it on. So I don't do many like universal takeaways. Boost is a pretty good one. NITROUS is a pretty good one. You know, Boost will add this kind of percentage, roughly this percentage of power, but it doesn't always do that. It doesn't do that if you're running pump gas and you don't have enough timing in it. Well, if you don't have enough timing in it, that not enough timing is going to hurt it on the top end way more than the bottom end. You don't have intercooling, you know, all of these things that can otherwise change what should be fairly predictable results, but it doesn't always work like that. So those are the things that we came up with. You know, obviously cam, rocker ratio. I don't think more porting on the head is going to do anything. That Airflow Research head's a really good head for a 355. And we know that that thing's made way more than that. So we know that it'll support it. But maybe is there a way that we could make it more torque oriented? You know, that sort of thing. I would like to try even bigger diameter runners if they're, but I don't think that there are any available. I honestly wouldn't mind trying longer runners, like extend the runners into the common plenum. I might try that, especially if I could try bigger ones. And then I would want to do maybe more porting on the lower portion. But again, like I said, we ran on a 383 and it made a lot more power than this. So we know it'll support it. It made a lot more torque than this because the motor was bigger. Maybe we're going in the wrong direction. So you guys can let me know what you guys think. Scroll back to the beginning here and see what you guys got going on a Friday night. Nitrous and boost at the same time. Yep. Longer stroke and more compression is how you make more torque. Compression, yes. A longer stroke, if we were to keep the displacement the same and we go to a longer stroke and go to less bore and we keep the displacement the same, I would argue that that's not the direction that you would go. If you keep displacement the same, you're probably going to make very close to the same power. If you just put a longer stroke in it and make it a stroker motor, make it bigger, you could also do that with a bigger bore and make more power, because the bigger motor, like we saw with a 383, is just going to make more power. I see a tune port or a 5-liter 302, and I click. That's good. Can we use a Mark 454, for example? Say I'm building my first one and need all the tips I can get. If you have questions about your 454, please go ahead and ask. You can make more torque if you get the right rod ratio. Exactly. And dimpled pistons and all of that. From scavenging, long runner intakes, long tube headers. I think that I don't know that we could get more peak torque from a header design, but I would like to play with header designs on that particular motor to see if there's something that the long runner tune port responds to that maybe other combinations like a carbureted combination would not. I think that there's something there. I just don't know if, like we saw with in this case, the 4-in-1 and the tri-Y, we saw a fairly big change down low, but we didn't see a big change at the peak. So we might not see that from adjusting the header design. I've seen examples where we can lose a lot of power. We can lose power all the way through, or we can lose a lot down low. I haven't seen instances where we lose a whole bunch at the top, but I've seen instances with header designs where we lose a lot of stuff from the torque peak and below. And I have seen sometimes when, like, the wrong headers lost power everywhere. So, but I don't think, given how close these two were, that the header configurations are too far off. But I would like to play that and find out. Maybe if we do an ultra long, either 4-in-1 primary or extend the lengths of the tri-Ys, that we could do something with that. Smaller crank journals for less drag. Yep, that could do it. I don't know if, no, I'm certain that it didn't. This 350 did not have a windage tray on it. So oiling system mods would add power. They tend to add power. The power that they tend to add increases with engine speed normally. So we could see something at the peak torque, but more at the horsepower peak. Compression nitromethane would definitely do it. Could you cut the top runners and add another inch of runner length? Yeah, I think we could just extend it into the common plenum. Electric water pump and oil pump, long runner intake and long tube headers. It has both of those on there. To get it lower in the RPM range, more compression and a 108 LSA can to bring the torque down lower in the RPM range. I don't necessarily mean that we need more torque below the peak. I just want a bigger peak number. A custom cam will do it for sure. Yep. When I say compression ratio, I also mean dynamic compression ratio. Yeah, Callaway did the Sledgehammer, although Lingenfelter built the motor for them. I have a question on fuel. If I was running a Pro Charger on E85 with a Holley Sniper throttled by the EFI, if I were to add a little nitrous on a plate, could I still use Q16 on the nitrous? Yes, you can. Short duration high lift is what's ideal for torque production, from what I understand. Do a 2-stroke conversion. Yeah. Duo, the stickers that you put on would be super itchy. Drag van, I can't see why not. You're only using it for nitrous. Yep. But I'm curious, since you already have E85 in your system, why wouldn't you want to run E85 on the nitrous? We do that all the time. Can you add an I don't know option? Just guess. I mean, it doesn't matter. Depends on what head you're using. If you're using a single or dual pattern cam as a flow of the heads, decide what cam pattern you use. I don't agree with that. A single pattern and a dual pattern cam will do the same thing on a head that has a poor intake to exhaust flow relationship as it does on a good intake to exhaust flow relationship. And by that, I mean the results that you get from the cam change with those two heads might not be identical, but the trend is going to be the same. If one of the cams makes more low speed power with a good head, it's also going to do that with a bad head. I've tested that many, many times. And the flow relationship thing is not the end all be all. And I know I seem to have more low end torque on a single pattern camshaft than I do with the fuel pattern camshaft. Is that a 4-pattern camshaft? Or dual? Maybe dual. Okay. It's going to sound crazy. It might blow a motor, but I say we spray half the NA power number at any given point through the dyno run. So if we're making 300 horsepower at 3,000, we spray 150 at that RPM. Why would you think that that's crazy? I mean, if you're spraying 50% of the NA power at whatever the peak is, wherever you're hitting that nitrous, you're spraying more than half of that. You're spraying more than 50% because the peak number below the horsepower peak, the output of the motor is going to be less. So if you hit your nitrous at 3,000 or 3,500 RPM and it's 50% of the peak number, it's going to be 60, 70, whatever percent of the number at the lower engine speed, right? I still don't understand what a single pattern cam is. It means that normally both, but it could just be one. It means that it has the same lift on the intake and exhaust. So let's say they're both 500 lift and has the same duration. That could be one or the other. Normally, I look at a single pattern cam as what it's doing with the duration and less about what it's doing with the lift. But that would mean that on the intake side, it has 220 degrees of duration, and the exhaust also has 220 degrees of duration. So that's what a single pattern is. A dual pattern has different ones. So it has 220 on the intake and 230 on the exhaust, for example. I think a single pattern cam won't. If I understand things correctly, the dual pattern cam will make peak torque at a higher RPM, and that will be advantageous. Ball bearing crank journals. There you go. Dual pattern only helps TPI when you have a single Gen 3 exhaust. So the dual pattern cam only works when you have a bad exhaust? Try that. Compression would give you the torque. Compression will add a percentage. And try I'm thinking you're thinking a first TPI intake, not a fast one. Not sure on the TPI intake, but it seems to shut power down early. Well, it's not shutting power down. It's just that the runner length is designed to make power in a given RPM range, and it's not designed to do it beyond that point. Compression and tight LSA for the 35 foot-pounds. I've seen step headers. Does anybody make step up and step down headers? So you want to go from 1 3/4 to 1 5/8. Does anybody mess around with variable length runners? Silly for the street, but cool for race. I've done lots of testing on different runner lengths. We've made adjustable intake manifolds that do that. Hook up your air compressor to the engine. Bingo. You buy me lunch. I solved it. Super itchy razor blade rebuild. Yeah, there's lots of super itchy stuff. Let's see. Salad bowl. Yep. Valve place. Man, I'm way back, and here we go. Runner length, yep, we could try that. Valve relief, center head gaskets. I don't think running on if people had mentioned running on an E85, but I don't think E85 is going to do it. I don't think E85, we don't see much of a gain running E85 on NA motors. Salad bowl. What's about the most power loss with stock exhaust manifolds versus long tube headers? The worst example I've seen is on the Dodge Hemi, on the Ram, specifically on the Ram truck applications. Their log headers are terrible. My dogs are in attack mode. Reduce pumping losses in combustion chamber and injector timing is where you need to look. I don't think injector timing is not going to do anything on this tuneport motor. Compression definitely will. A lightweight flywheel would change it, but again, those things tend to add power with engine speed. This intake manifold doesn't have any bell mouths on it. It had the plenums do have a little bit of a radius entry going into the runners. Richard, I'm a big fan of the 502 Ramjet engine. They do look really cool, especially the intake design. You're aware of any intake similar to for an LS or a big buck Chevy? Oh, that they're not available anymore. Those are long runner tunnel ram style intake manifolds. Maybe a high ram would be kind of comparable, although those are the Ramjet ones were even longer than that. Header collector length. We did have extensions on both of them. The extension length was different on the 4-1 than it was on the Tri-Y. And that tends to help torque production, which I think might have been part of this difference that we saw. That tends to help torque production way early in the RPM range than it does. It has no effect usually on peak power. Somebody having commercials pop up? You're so wrong on the injector timing. We've done injector timing sweeps on the engine dyno and haven't seen big power changes from that. We've tried it. We've tried it 5 or 6 times now and have not seen, because I've had people tell me, I've had tuners tell me, oh, the injector timing, you're going to pick up like 10% or 15% of power. I'm like, that's not going to happen. They told me the same thing about injectors too. Oh, if you use these injectors, you get like 10% across the board. I'm like, there's no way that an injector change is going to do that. If we keep the airfill the same, an injector change is not going to do that. And we tried it and it did not do that. So I want it to be a thing. I want it to work. I want it to add more power. And injector timing on a direct injected motor, that's a big thing. But on a tune port motor, we just haven't seen it. Speaking of torque, have you done any testing anti-reversion mufflers? I checked the channel but didn't find any. No, you won't find any up there. I'm not sure I understand what an anti-reversion muffler is. I've seen anti-reversion headers that have the cone in them, the AR stuff from back in the day. But I'm not sure that you actually want that to happen. Building a 408 Cleveland 225 CHI heads. That's all a good start. Looking for 550. There's no reason that those heads can't make that kind of power. A 408 with that head. Do you have Michael, what intake manifold do you have on there? Is it their single plane intake manifold? If so, I'm thinking you're looking, if it's a, is it a daily driver? Would running the coil unplug or coil near plug, an individual coil pack, I don't think is going to show any power numbers on this mild of an application. We just don't have cylinder pressure problems. The distributor and coil are more than enough for this application. Extend push rod length. Is there a formula to figure out the rate a motor would increase speed with power increase? You could show that on a chassis dyno. And you could use the old slide rule for the change in power. You can see what, not what the rate of change of acceleration rate of the motor is, but you can see what the change in the quarter mile ET in mile an hour would be. Any word on CFM comparison between two different displacement engines that make the same horsepower? No, I haven't done that test yet. Oh, your machinist is saying hydraulic lifters? Hydraulic roller lifters shouldn't, I've never heard of them having a problem. Hydraulic flat tappet stuff, I've heard people complain about that, but I haven't heard about hydraulic roller lifters. Thought I learned from that single pattern cams are never better. Again, there are absolutes. When I've tested single pattern cams, like I said, sometimes they're better down low, but less up top. So, and then it depends on everybody's idea of what a single pattern, dual pattern cam test actually is different. Adriano, you went from your stage 2 cam to a stage 4 cam on a 5.3, and was this an NA motor? Yeah, the free valve stuff has not has not come into being, I don't think. Has not manifested itself. What's your opinion of ACES TBI EFI setup versus Holley? I have never tested ACES TBI setup. I'm not a big fan of 4-hole throttle body injection. Never say never. That's Justin Bieber. I thought that was the name of a James Bond movie. Same mechanism as those headers. Everyone promoting the anti-reversion muffler header stops exhaust bouncing back into the combustion chamber and increases torque. What they don't realize is that what they would be stopping is not exhaust going in there. What they would be stopping is a reflected wave going back there, which you want, because it's a negative reflected wave. And it actually helps draw intake charge in. It's part of the scavenging effect, which is why I don't understand why people would want not to have that unless they're just stopping exhaust reversion. I don't know how you do one without the other. All the old school VW cams are single pattern. They have quite a few dual pattern cams now. Harlan, you almost can't measure the actual running deflection. It would be very hard to do while the thing is running. You could get an idea if you, in a static situation, because you could, on a static situation with the real springs in there, if you have a solid camshaft in there, you can see the deflection usually from all of the things. The rocker is going to deflect, the push rod's going to bend, but those things are going to happen more in a dynamic situation. So it's really hard to see how much you're losing. I think that they can do that on a spintron and get a better idea. How does a longer intake runner make more torque? It has to do with a reflected wave, and when that reflected wave arrives in the combustion chamber, to basically, it's a pressure wave. It's a supercharged pressure wave that helps cylinder filling. And the longer the runner length determines when it arrives relative to piston position. So if it's longer, it's going to arrive at a different time than when it's shorter. And when it arrives, if it's shorter, it wants to do it at a very high RPM, because the reflected wave goes up and back very quickly, and it arrives too early to make low speed power, but it arrives at the right time at a higher engine speed. And the reverse is true of a long runner intake manifold. Where did you get the Dorman LS3 intake? Looking to purchase one? I don't know. That's not directed at me, right? I don't know that I have a Dorman LS3 intake manifold. NALH6 ported 0799's 3-stage dry sump header. Okay, this on the Porsche Carrera. Yeah, so you wanted to put more camshaft in it. Searching for small block Ford cam. I was surprised at how every Ford performance cam seems to be single pattern. Yeah, a lot of the letter cams, the B cam and F cam and E cam and all those were single patterns. Yeah, Comp does have those new lifters. I think that they're EDM'd. They have an EDM oiling hole in them, maybe. They're not Endurex. They're something like that, though. You get a Cadillac supercharger to fit on it? On what? On the small block Chevy? Richard increased the price of Dorman intakes. Yeah, but not LS3 ones. The ones that I did the testing on were the Dorman LS2 intake manifolds. They're the ones that everybody was saying, oh, this is a copy of a Fast. It's not a copy of a Fast. Not at all. But it does make the same power as the Trailblazer SS did, which is good, because a lot of guys don't want to put a Trailblazer SS intake manifold on, even though it is the best factory cathedral port intake manifold. But a lot of guys can't fit it because it's too tall. But if you can get a short version that will fit under hoods of F bodies and Corvettes and stuff, and then that's what that Dorman LS2 did. And then after I did the video on it, it did keep the prices on them just went nuts. The LS6 manifold, which Dorman also makes a version of that, is also good. Can you get a Cadillac supercharger M122, I believe, to fit on the 6-liter with LS3 heads? The one that I ran did not have the adapters that the people made were not for LS3 heads. They were for cathedral port heads. The ones that I have videos up on running that Cadillac supercharger on a 4.8 and a 5.3, I think, or something, or maybe a 6.0. So Julius, they're touting the weld's not inside the pipe, so they're saying that the flow is better. I would like to see. I'd like to see a simulation of that to see how far the boundary layer is, how high the boundary layer is up above the surface of the inside of that exhaust tube, and see how that boundary layer, where the boundary layer is relative to the weld. Is the weld inside the boundary layer anyway, where it's not really an issue? Is that a whole marketing thing? Maybe it's not. I mean, motorcycle stuff is pretty serious in terms of their power outputs. So I'd be interested to see that, though. You mentioned earlier about adding runner length by extending the runners into the plenum. Yes, it works. Changing the runner length changes where the motor wants to make power. I have lots of videos up of extending runner lengths. I've done lots and lots of adjustable intake manifolds where we change the runner length, and it definitely has an effect on the power curve. I mean, all you have to do is look at the LS intake test, either the cathedral port version where I tested all the manifolds, or the LS3 version, which I did 2 of those. I did the EFI ones and the carburetor ones. And just take a look at like a short runner manifold, like a high ram or even a sniper, any of these short runner manifolds. Look at those power curves versus like a fast manifold or even a factory on the LS3 stuff, factory LS3. Look at any of the other manifolds versus a factory LS3, and you'll see that the LS3, the long runner LS3, makes a lot more power through most of the curve in the case of the LS3. And that's what runner length does. Is there a way to compare piston to valve clearance between 2 different cams? Yes, you can measure it. And also, if you measured one and knew exactly what it was and knew all of your information on your thing, you can calculate the change would be for the other cam. 1968, thank you very much. Did you have a question? Yeah, if you have 95 intake valve clearance on your stage 2 cam, is there a way to guess how much I might have on a stage 4 cam? Yes. So Billy always had some sort of program, and I think Brian Tooley has one too, where if you have a known amount of piston to valve clearance and you change the camshaft, as long as we know the valve events of the other cam, you can calculate it and get a pretty good idea. What are your tips for a DIY turbo setup? How much do I need to get all of it roughly? I don't know about the pricing on it because it depends on what you can get and how much you can get stuff for. But a turbo is really inexpensive. The intercooler is inexpensive. They have tubing stuff. I don't know how much of it you can get done yourself. You're going to need injectors. If this is an LS, you're going to need injectors and a pump and obviously tuning. Tom, yeah, if you did in fact, the photo that I used, the lead photo, and I got lots of complaints about this, the lead photo that I used in the big TunePort original story that I did, I think I did for Hot Rod or Carcraft, one of those. And then also, I think I used the photo in the video, was a stack injection. It was a Hillborn or somebody's small block Chevy stack injection. And if you have that, you can, what I've done in the past is we just use a coupler and then another section of tubing. And I usually take my tubing over to the muffler shop and just have them flare the end of it so it looks like a radius entry. So it acts as a radius entry. And then I just use a silicone coupler and just make the stack length whatever length I want it to be. And then you can do that and decide, what length you want. And the dyno will tell you, where it should be. And they'll tell you, oh, yeah, that's too long, that's too short. And I'm still trying to get my camera to focus. There we go. I wonder if changing the runner length on a single cylinder does the same thing. Yes, it does. In fact, that's how they design Formula One engines. They design single cylinder versions and run the single cylinder version and then go, hey, look, this single cylinder made 300 horsepower. So if we multiply that times 8 or whatever the number of cylinders that they're going to have. And to my surprise, I didn't think it would translate that directly, but it did. And this information coming from guys like Yamaha and Cosworth and stuff. Will the Vortec iron head make more torque on a 355? I don't know. I don't know if that head is going to make more torque than an airflow research head. That airflow research head has a really good combustion chamber design because it's not, you're right, it's not about flow. So I don't know. More torque or roots blower. Yeah, we talked about that. No boost though. Julius, I don't know. I'd have to ask Mahovitz. He might know if there's a difference between the 5.8 head and the 5.4 head, but I don't know. I am not sure. How's our poll doing? 45% saying that they think a single pattern cam will be better, but 55% saying no. So you want to put all of those in a Mark 8? Not in a Cobra R? Matt, you have a stock bottom end LS3. I don't normally take a stock LS3 block or a stock bottom end LS3 with that block much more than 1,000 horsepower. That block's not as strong as like an aluminum 5.3 block or any of the iron blocks. It's been the single cylinder motors for insane RPMs for insane amount of times. Yeah, for Formula One level of stuff, they have to do. I mean, they're all dry sump motors and they're crazy. But yeah, for a Formula One style deal, the RPMs would be really high. But so are that's how they get the specific output. If you can run lots of RPM and you have a specific torque output, you go, hey, look, we're running more RPM, we're making more power. It's really cool though. But it is a lot of work because all of the drive and the oil pump and all that stuff, all of that has to be just like it is on a V8 engine or a V12 or V10 or whatever they're building. .350 4-bolt main, Edelbrock carburetor, straight pipe hitters. I don't know what that is. Stage 2 cam are better. Stage 2 racing lifters are better. Powerful transmission, powerful rear end. Remove all the brakes, radial tires. Are you asking a question there, or are you just telling us what you have? Richard, are you familiar with Star vacuum pumps? The name doesn't ring a bell. We've run vacuum pumps on the engine dyno before and tested them, but I don't know. I don't know about that one. Mine is at 650 wheel horsepower. Is it turbocharged or supercharged or something? Reloading. So they said that a 4-barrel is not going to do anything on a 305. They are incorrect. Can't afford a Cobra R. They are not cheap. That's true. I haven't run a Barra. My truck makes 337 horsepower, 5,000 RPM, and I'm happy it runs nice with AC and traffic. That's too much cam in it. What cam is in it? Did you tell me that already? Have you ever tested power gains from running a dry sump? I haven't specifically. I need to see if maybe Brule has, although I don't know. I honestly don't know if anybody that's putting a dry sump motor together, if they would come run it with a wet sump and then put an actual dry sump in it while they're there. I would be the only person that would do that. The Engine Masters guys might do it, but none of the engine builders are going to do that. They're just going to put it on there like that. So I don't know if I'd have to ask Steve. Oh, so you have a stage 2 BTR. Yeah, that's a stage 2 is not what I would put in a 5.3 of my truck. If I was going to put a camshaft in, I would put a Truck Norris in it, or maybe a torque cam, but maybe a Truck Norris, and then just rev it out just a little bit. Matt, so you got a TSP stage 3 cam, headers, torque storm. Okay. Snap the output shaft in half. Well, that means you're making power, right? So to give you an idea, reloading, when I did the 2-barrel, 4-barrel test, and this will give you an idea on like the power output that they're talking about, even if it's a 200 horsepower deal, small block Chevy. So, okay, so with this was a 350, not a 305, but it was only making 247 horsepower with the 2-barrel on it and headers. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my curve up there, so because I like nothing I like better than dyno curves. Then we put a quadrajet intake manifold on it, so it went from 247 to 277. And it started showing gains at 2,800 RPM. No loss below that. We ran it down to 2,200 RPM. And it showed gains big gains from 3,200 all the way out to 5,000, where we ran into a valve float issue. And that's a 2-barrel versus a 4-barrel. So 204, think about that, going from a 245 horsepower motor. You're still going to get good gains. So you'll get gains on a 305. I guarantee it. I guarantee. What heads and cam would you use on a 351 with a 380? What is a 385 crank? Is it 3.85? Are you building a stroker or something? And then you have to tell me how much power you want to make. Julius, I thought that you had already tried to send stuff. Did you ever find out what was going on with that? JM, a thermal quad actually would be good. I like the thermal quad on my Dodge. I'm surprised you haven't put a truck north cam in your truck yet. I know, now that I have a transmission in there, right? Yeah, reloading, you'll notice it, because it will be, think about that as a percentage of what's there. That's pretty big change. So what did I say? It went from 247 to 275. So that's like 30 horsepower or something. 247 to 277. Yeah, so it made 30 horsepower. That's pretty good bit. Mr. 2, you got a stage 2 turbo cam for your LQ4. That'll be good. That will work good. I wonder what the Pontiac 400 do with thermal quad. It should work good. They work great with the quadrajet. I mean, that quadrajet intake manifold and the Q-jet work great. So I'm going to go ahead and close out our poll at 57% saying no on a single battery cam. They've obviously been listening to all of my nonsense. One more minute. So get those questions in quickly. On a Mercruiser 305 2-barrel was 190, and the 4-barrel was 225. I know I had a 305 in my Rhinell, and I wanted to put a 4-barrel on. We put weaker springs on the exhaust valves compared to the intake to see what horsepower changes. No, but I have done valve spring horsepower tests. So I had that videos up on the LS. We ran stock springs, we ran beehive springs, and we ran dual springs. Do you watch the Skid Factory? I do, yeah. I've seen some of their stuff. I like the guys from Russia. Yeah, reloading. It's not just a little bit at the top. It was all the way through. It was you're going to see gains for like a 2,000 RPM spread. So it's definitely noticeable. Plus, you get to hear the secondaries kick in. Reloading. I did. I'll send you a response on that. Garage 54. Yeah, that, those guys do some crazy stuff. I love that. Yeah, the 4-pattern cams are not what I would get for a torque one. What's the best head cam modification for a stock LS2 on Trailblazer? How much power do you want to make? That stock head's really good. That's a 243 or a 799 in an LS2. You could port that head, and that if you port that head will support 600 horsepower. So I don't know how much you want to make. Mike, what's up? A thermoquad on Chevy 305 and it worked great. I liked it on my 360 Dodge. 500 LS2, 500 foot-pounds. That's not going to happen with a 6-liter LS2. Oh no, I take that back. That will. I spoke too soon. I think that will happen. I'm trying to think. I'll have to look up my LS2 stuff. I think we had to have made over 500 foot-pounds with those. That would make sense. I don't know why I was thinking 500 was going to be a lot. 500 horsepower on an LS2 is just a small camshaft. So that will be easy. Six-liter. Holder LS2. Yeah. I think a stock one was 465 when we ran on the engine dyno. So here's my LS2 crate motor. Yeah, 560, 570 is a flywheel, but it didn't get to 500 foot-pounds. But I think it should with a better intake manifold on it. Oh, I know. We can look up. I know. Look up. This will be the last thing I can do for you guys. Here we go. Yeah, so a 6-liter with a good cam in it, and this one had trick flow heads on it. It did make 500 foot-pounds. It made 570 something horsepower and 508 foot-pounds of torque at the flywheel. So that's possible with an LS2 if with a good set of heads. Put the springs on top of the pistons. Yeah, I like when they put all the flywheels, stacked all the flywheels together too. The oval wheels. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't like that. For your 434 stroker, take a look at the 427 videos that we did recently with the guys at Brian Tooley Racing. You'll see lots of different head choices there. Stock 5.3 heads flow best around 500. I have flow data on all the heads. Have you ever tried 1.8 rockers? Yes, I have a rocker video up. Are you talking about just a 1.8 rocker with the stock camshaft? I've done that, so the video's up. Oh, and before I go, I wanted to mention today I was outside looking at the under the hood of my truck, as you do, and I was looking at the mini supercharger, the AMR 500, and it will bolt. If you take the alternator out, it could be made to go where the alternator was. so I have a complete accessory drive set up for an LS that I did testing on, and I keep around so that if we want to run all the accessories on the engine on it, we can. So I can make that work. The problem that we're going to talk about that tomorrow night. I'm not going to go through all that right now. We're going to talk about all of that tomorrow night, but it's pretty cool stuff. But so I will see you guys all tomorrow.